What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and back with another Dad Return format video. This is the format based around SJC Minneapolis in April of 2008. And the deck is kind of like a tier 0 format. Like, Dad Return is just so powerful. It just blows a lot of other things out of the water. And some of the competitors are also not the most fun to play against, like FDK decks. They're actually pretty good. But, it's still a fun format to dive into. It's a format that was very game warping for the game as a whole. So it's very cool to see, what the format was like and what you could do in it. And there are some other decks that you can potentially play in the format. For instance, this is Six Samurai. Six Samurai actually did win a SJC around that time period. Not quite in Dad Return format. It was slightly different because it used a different ban list. But it is still with the Phantom Darkness cards out, and it still managed to win. So, I figured I might as well take that list, adjust it slightly for this ban list. Basically, the one change was switching out a Call the Haunted for Monster Reborn, and running it here and see how I do. Now, that original list was made by John Moore. I'm not John Moore, so, I'm probably not going to be as good at this deck as he was, and I probably won't have, the knowledge to pilot this deck to its maximum efficiency, but I have been playing Six Sams for the past couple formats here, showing off on the channel. So I hope that I've learned a thing or two about this deck and can hopefully pilot this deck to victory. Now, the main goal of this deck is to get out a 6-Am, then get out Grandmaster, then get out Xian. That's the ideal. But if you don't get that, you just want to get into Grandmaster as quickly as possible, even if you don't have the Xian. And in order to do that, we are playing a bunch of 6-Ams, first of all, but we're also playing Reasoning to get into our Grandmaster quicker. Now, if they get wise to this and they start calling 5, that's obviously going to be bad for us because if we hit the Grandmaster, then it's kind of rough. Or if we hit the Sidra as well, that's also pretty rough. Sidra Giant in here, I think just to sort of get more aggressive here, which you kind of need to do given the aggression level of all the other decks in the format. But actually, in sort of testing, I think I might take out Cyber Dragon in the future, just like if I, sort of tailor the deck more to my own tastes. I feel like Cyber Dragon isn't quite as necessary, but I definitely see why it's in here, and as an aggressive monster, it is pretty good. So we got the double Sidra, we got the triple Grandmaster, we got the triple Xian. This thing is nuts if you bring it out. A lot of decks cannot quite deal with a thing that basically locks them into one spell trap activation each turn. And, if that's negated with something like Solemn Judgment, then that's even better for us here. We've got Anishi here to bring out. This is kind of like Chaos Orc Light. It's not really the best in the world, but it is something that you can play. And if we are getting a bunch of 6-Ams engraved through things like Reasoning, or we're drawing a bunch through things like the newly released Six Samurai United, which is a very good card for this deck, then, this is not a bad card to have. We also got double Spirit of the Six Samurai. A great combo you can do with this is summon this thing out, special summon out Grandmaster, equip it with the Spirit of the Six Samurai, potentially get another draw on top of that there. So I like this card overall. I know that some people don't like it as much in this list, but I think it's kind of neat, and, I do understand why it's here. We've also got Six Samurai Iro to deal with set monsters. Come on to deal with face-up spell traps. Doesn't come up that often, but it sometimes does. We've got double Rhoda to search it out if we need it. We've got triple Six Samurai Yaichi to deal with back row, and we've got double Zanji for weird edge cases. This thing is also one of your few ways that you actually have to out-dad. Of course, you do need to assemble a pretty big board into the dad to actually use the Zanji effect to pop it, but, it's very important for that reason. Anishi's your other way to out-dad, really, which is probably why it's in here, as it is very important to out-dad, as this deck does not really have too many ways to out-dad beyond these. We got BrainCon, that's also a dad out, and also just good at taking control of your opponent's monster. If you do need to just hard tribute out a Grandmaster, you can do that as well, so that's pretty nice. Heavy Storm to deal with our opponent's back row, MST to deal with our opponent's back row. Monster Reborn, crazy card in this format. I don't know why they brought this back, but this is especially good in our deck. It'll be Reasoning, hit like a Grandmaster, but they called 5 because they know what deck we're playing. We can Reborn that Grandmaster and still get it online, so that's pretty good. Premat essentially serves the same purpose here. We've got Sword of Drilling Light as well to stall off a bit. Now, this isn't good into like dad, obviously, but if your opponent doesn't have the dad set up, it can buy you time to actually set up your 6-Am board, which can be very valuable. We got Mirror Force to deal with our opponent's monsters. We've got double Phoenix Windblast to spin things back to the top of their deck, triple Solemn, as I mentioned, and a Torrential Tribute to blow up the board. For the side deck, we've got double Cypher Soldier for warriors. We've got Meiko to deal with like skill drain or just decks that are floodgating us. We got Command to deal with floodgates as well. We got Van Gyalgion, the Dark Dragon Lord. This is very interesting. This is really if you just negate with the Solemn Judgment, or you negate with Pulling the Rug, or Spell Shield type 8. I think this deck is still teched out to deal with Perfect Circle decks mainly. So I think at the time, the dad threat was not as well known or thought about. But it's a very, very funny tech here. You just get out this big guy after negating something, so that's pretty cool. We've got Double Cunning in the mirror match. We got a Latent Vortex deal with big boards our opponent can make. We've got My Body to Shield to protect our monsters from effects that would destroy them. And we got the pullings and the special type days, as I mentioned. And we got Royal Decree to shut down trap focused decks. That's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and see how this deck can actually play. First match I want to show off is just one that really shows what the deck can do when it actually manages to set up its board that it wants to actually go for. Which we will actually be able to do here because we draw into a 6-Am, Grandmaster, and Xian on top of 6-Am United to draw even more cards. This is going to be very good for us. We activate the United, it gets a counter from the command, gets a counter from the Grandmaster. We send it to Grave now to draw 2. So, I mean, that is about as good as it gets. We draw into Reasoning, and we're debating here, like, do we save the Reasoning? Do we go for it? I just decided to go for it because, like, we're setting up a really big board. We got Solemn Judgment plus Xian, so if they activate something, we can then negate it with Solemn. So we are in a really, really good spot. I'm not really too afraid of overcommitting here, so I'm just going to go for it. And we hit into a Yaichi, so that's going to be very good for popping our opponent's back row. We could have potentially brought this out in defense, because realistically, like, if they attack into this, it could deal some damage. But if they attack into this, we're probably going to pop the command to keep it alive, so either way, we should be fine here. And then we bring out a Xian here, and we set Solemn, pass back to them. Good luck to my opponent. I don't really know what they can do into this. And yeah, they just admit defeat. I mean, that is a really, really good board there. And they don't want to reveal what they're playing. So I respect that play. We're going on into game 2 here. And we've got another pretty great hand. They go for a Manju here, going to search out an advanced ritual art there to potentially go into a demise or something. That's the best thing you can probably bring out off of ARA. But it looks like they don't have that this turn, or they don't want to commit it this turn, so they're just going to set one pass back to us. We have a pretty good hand because we have Grandmaster and Xian, plus a Yaichi that can actually do something here against this board. So we're going to special summon out that Grandmaster, and then they go for the TT here. And they actually do have a DD Crow, so, you know, they say hold on Grandmaster effect because they do have the DD Crow to banish that. So that's going to be a bit unfortunate for us because obviously we were targeting the Grandmaster, and so that will indeed get banished. That will shut off that loop there. We do have a Solemn to stop anything like huge that they do. Like if they do go for ARA, we could potentially Solemn that if we so wish. We might indeed do that. They go for heavy, though, so we don't have the choice to do that. They go for ARA here, and they're going to send a Beta the Magnet Warrior and an Archfiend Soldier. You might be confused, like, what's going on there? Why do they have Beta in their deck, an Archfiend Soldier in their deck? Well, I think they're playing a, like, Demise plus Evil Hero Fusion Dark Gaia, you know, style strategy, which is kind of neat. Basically, the idea is you get a bunch of normals in Grave that are rocks and fiends, and then you go for a big Evil Hero Dark Gaia and a Demise. So that's kind of cool. I'm not sure if it's necessarily better or worse than the original Demise OTK where you just send insects to bring out Doomdozer, but it is something you can do, which is kind of neat. So they're going to go for a trade-in, pitch a Demise, and draw 2. Looks like they didn't really draw what they wanted there, but they're just going to attack in for 2,400, and then they're going to pass back to us. We draw a new Premat, which is actually very good here. It can allow us to sort of actually set up a way to deal with the Demise, which is our Great Shogun Xian. Because we go for the Premat, and we target that Yaichi there. We can then summon out the Spirit here, and then we can spell summon out the Great Shogun Xian. Now, unfortunately, we can't equip Spirit to Xian. That would be obviously the ideal, because then we get a draw here. But we can just attack over the Demise normally with the Xian, and then attack in for 1,800 total. Now, we ultimately decide to equip the Spirit to the Yaichi here, just to sort of give it a bit more protection against something like a normal summoned Manju, for instance. Now they can't get over that. So I feel like this is fine. Also, if they don't have any back row next turn, we can potentially just attack over whatever they have. But looks like they do indeed have back row there. So we're just going to go for the Yaichi and pop that. But first, we're going to go for summon out Spirit and then try and pop the Yaichi, because if it's something like Phoenix Wing Blast or something, we want to know about it right now. Because if we go Yaichi, they chain Phoenix Wing, then we lose the Spirit. Now, they could just chain Phoenix Wing Wind Blast to the Spirit Summon there anyways. But they're probably saving that for, like, the Xian anyway. So it won't really matter there if it is Phoenix Wing. And it looks like it is Phoenix Wing, so that will spin back the Xian there. I guess the thing would be, like, Divine Wrath, which Spirit cannot... I believe Spirit can't substitute, maybe. But I doubt they're playing Divine Wrath. So, yeah, we can attack in with the Spirit and the Iroh. This also gets in extra damage because the Yaichi, you know, uses effects so it can't attack. And also next turn, we can potentially set up the Spirit on the Iroh and have just another big beater here. Now, this does play a bit poorly into if they draw like Manju or something, and then they attack over the Yaichi there. That is the downside to this. And honestly, in hindsight, I probably should have just kept the Spirit on the Yaichi there just to play around that, because Yaichi is very, very good insurance for if they do have some back row here. They've used up TT, so I'm not too concerned about too much back row that they might have. I think the big thing would be like, I don't know, like Mirror Force probably. But they do indeed have the Manju here, and they're going to search out Contract. Now, the nice thing here is that if they attack over Yaichi, then I can just pop the Spirit instead. But I choose not to. I choose to just take it and lose the Yaichi. I think this was probably a mistake on my part. I got a bit greedy because I was like, well, they probably don't have any back row. They would have committed it before. I have the read that they did not have Manju last turn, or else they probably would have done that to just deck in and potentially, get into things that they need for their combos. I felt kind of safe just letting the Yaichi die because I didn't think they had any real back row here. But this probably was a bit too much for risk for me because they could have saved the Manju because it wouldn't have actually been able to get over the Yaichi. So yeah, this was a bit risky. But I'm going to summon out the Come in addition to this, equip the Spirit to the Iroh there, and then attack over the Manju with the Iroh, get a draw in, and then get in for lethal damage. So luckily that did indeed go through, so we were not punished for our greed here, but I think I could have played that a little bit more safely, but this is sort of the ideal case for the deck. If you're able to set up the Xian and set up the Grandmaster plus another 6-am, you've got a really strong board there that's kind of hard to out unless your opponent has Dad. Now, the downside to that is if your opponent does have Dad, which a lot of decks in the format can get to pretty easily, then you're in a bit of a tough spot. But if you have Xian potentially locking what they can do in terms of like drawing and getting deeper into their deck, then you can potentially prevent the Dad from coming down, but it is still a bit of an ask. But I wanted to show off the deck when it's firing on capacity here. Well, let's dive into a game where we see some of the deck's weaknesses in this format. Now, I wanted to sort of show off a game here against Dad Return, but unfortunately there was miscommunication between me and my opponent in between games, so unfortunately we were not able to face off against Dad Return, but hopefully this match still shows what a problem Dad can be for this deck. And, I don't, not that big of a deal, and Soul is a frequent guest on the channel, and it's always a pleasure to have them on, and they always play some spicy decks, so I'm not too upset with how this actually turned out, because we actually did get to show what I kind of wanted to show with this game. But I do want to talk about this first turn, because this first turn was a heartbreaker, and is a reason why I'm like considering potentially in the future, if I sort of go back to this deck and change it to my own taste, why I'd cut the Sidra, because we have a Monster Reborn in hand, we go Reasoning, and I'm like, okay, even if they call 5, which they did, we hit the Grandmaster, and then we can bring it back with Reborn. So we still have Grandmaster online, and we can still get into our Xian, because if we hit into any other 6-am, then we can just summon out one of the 6-ams from hand, probably Yaichi, just to pop that back row, and then we can just summon out the Xian and feel good about that, right? But unfortunately, we hit Sidra, which does not go along with our game plan, right? Sidra is a form of aggression in this deck, which is good, but it unfortunately did not synergize with the rest of the archetypes. So as is, we're in kind of a tough spot. So what I do is I try and set up for next turn. I summon out Zanji, and then I actually just pass back to them. The way I figure it is that if that's like a Disc Commander set or a Sangan or something that my opponent would want to be in graveyard to prepare for their later plays, which a lot of decks in this format do have some form of that or another, then I don't want to be attacking into this. I just want to summon out the Zanji. It's kind of hard to get over if they don't have, a tribute monster or something here, or a Dad if they can bring that down. And, next turn, if they do clear it, I've got Reborn to bring it back. Then I can summon out one of the other 6-am from hand and then go for Xian here. So I figured that this is ultimately the best option for us. And I do stand by that. I think that was the best play. Unfortunately, we get a bit punished here because our opponent goes summon out Pyramid Turtle and go creature swaps. This is not your typical Dad Return list. This is actually zombies. So you can build zombies in this format. I don't think it's necessarily well equipped in this format because, like, the downside is so many decks are playing DD Crow that your deck gets really hosed by that. So it's not really the best. You did get Goblin Zombie, so that's very good, and that's a dark as well, so it can fuel Dad stuff, but I just don't think the deck is really worth it at this point. But my opponent is going to be able to pop off with zombies here, bring out Zombie Master, activate card, save for turn, and pitching to bring back a monster from grave. I don't have Crows, because this deck wasn't playing Crows, and they're not on the side either, so maybe I should have adjusted the side before actually diving into games in this format, because DD Crow would obviously be a must side in for this deck. I do get why it's not playing DD Crow, though, because it is playing the Reasonings, and if you hit Crow off Reasoning, that's really, really bad for you. But going second or going into games 2 and 3, I might even take out the Reasonings for the Crows, just because Crow is so essential to this deck's game plan. So I'm going to Reborn. I'm going to target the Shogun, see if that goes through. It looks like it will indeed go through, so I can bring out that Shogun. And unfortunately, Shogun is not a 6-Sam, so I can't, like, bring out a Yaichi and, deal with the back row or something like that. So I'm in kind of a tough spot. Now, I could have brought out potentially an Iroh or a Yaichi attacked into the Reaper just to sort of, like, deal some damage and protect the Xian if that set card's like a sacrificial armor, which it probably is not. But I felt like that was a bit bad because they're just going to die next turn because they cannot pop Xian to protect themselves, and I wouldn't even want to do that if they did. And so I figure I'll save that for later. For when I could potentially get in a different 6-Sam or something. But unfortunately, my opponent does have Crush Card Virus here, so it might have been better to actually bring out a 6-Sam here if I brought out Yaichi or Spirit, that I actually could have played around the Crush Card play. But again, I don't think it's the best move to do here. I think it would have been kind of bad, honestly, because if it's anything but Crush Card, then, I'm just sort of lost a 6-Sam for free, right? So yeah, you could argue that if it's anything but Crush Card, I'm still, losing the game here. So I should just play around the Crush Card harder than anything else. But I do think that, it did make sense to hold the 6-Sams in hand, but that will just be the end of the game. I'm not going to reveal what I've got. If they destroy the Shogun, then I'm just dead next turn anyways. So, yeah, but we're going to go into game 2. I bring in a Lightning Vortex, and I believe I bring in a Command to deal with Card of Safe Return. Not that they'd activate Card of Safe Return if they didn't have a way to already get value off it. But, I just figure it's another continuous spell that they might have in their deck. They could also be playing a Skill Drain Zombie variant, so not that Command would actually help against that, so I should probably have brought in Meiko instead of Command, but still, I don't know. This deck did not really have much in the side deck for this deck in particular, and also a lot of other Dad Return decks, so this deck would definitely need a tune-up in that department. If you want to play it for yourself there. But I have a pretty good starting hand here if I want to go for it. I could just summon out a 6-Sam, special summon Grandmaster, special summon out Xian, and just lock them into 1 activation per turn. However, I do also have TT. So what I'm thinking here is, okay, I set TT. If they commit a thing here, then I pop it. If they don't commit a thing in their setting, then I'm still alive for next turn where I can go for a big 6-Sam play. So that's my reasoning here. I think it is honestly correct because they're not playing Dad Return, so they're playing Zombies. Zombies did not really have the sort of amount of filtration that a Dad Return deck typically does. If I was against Dad Return, I probably would go for the Xian play because Xian locking them into potentially just a Rhoda for turn or a 1D draw or 1 alert for turn is pretty good for us here. But I do think that given we're up against Zombies, we want to hold this and just set TT pass. So they go for Upstart, so that is one of the tools they do have to draw here. They're just going to set 1, set another, pass back to us, and that's sort of what we expected to happen here. We're going to go for Iroh. We're not too afraid of that back row. If it is something that's disastrous for us, we still have TT set here. And also, we're going to be getting a Grandmaster add back if they don't have Crow. So I feel like we're in a good spot here overall, even if it is something disastrous for us. So we're supposed to summon out that Grandmaster, supposed to summon out the Xian. And then we're going to attack into this with the Iroh, hoping that's like a turtle or something. We just pop that. Unfortunately for us, it's a Goblin Zombie, so Goblin Zombie will still get the search here. But, we get in for a ton of damage, so I'm ultimately okay with that. I could potentially hold the Xian attack, just in case they've got a Dim Priz set. Dim Priz is really bad for this deck, because if they hit into Xian or Grandmaster, it's not destroyed, so you don't get the add back, or you don't get to protect in the case of Xian. But as is, it looks like they're just going to take it all. So I feel very good about that. And we're going to pass back to my opponent. They go for MST here on the TT, which is a bit unfortunate. We have a bit less defense than we had otherwise. But, we're still in a good spot until they go for Goblin, or not Goblin Zombie, but Zombie Master. They're going to pitch a turtle and bring back that turtle because you can still do that in this format for some reason. But you can still do it because that's how they ruled it at the time. They're going to attack the turtle into the Iroh here, take 5, and then they're going to bring out a Goblin Zombie here. And they actually make a crucial error here. Normally, I don't bring up my opponent's errors, but I do think it is important to note just because, I do think that the 6-Sam deck has a glaring weakness in this format, and it is Dad. So I want to point out that, when Dad comes down, we are just dead. Because what my opponent should do here, they've got 2 Darks in grave right now. They've got a Dark on field in the form of Zombie Master. They decide to attack into the Iroh. What they should do here is attack into Grandmaster. And they realize this immediately after because they say in chat, I messed up. I should have done that. But, if they attack into the Grandmaster, they get 3 Darks in grave, and just looking at their hand, they've got Double Dad here. And Double Dad is really bad for us because we actually do lose the entire board here. Now, we will still get an add back off Grandmaster, but, the way they do this probably is just, try and pop Grandmaster first. It would have to die due to its effect. They would, we'd add it back to hand, which is very good for us, but we have another Grandmaster hand, so it's kind of awkward because we don't really care about Grandmaster dying here. And then they would pop the Iroh, then they pop the Shien, and they would have double dad on field, maybe even just one dad on field if they really wanted to conserve the resources, because you can potentially just do a Zombie Master play next turn again, pitching Goblin Zombie, bringing back Goblin Zombie, crashing into 2 things that we have if we do manage to set something up again, and that will actually be 3 Darks again. And yeah, it's just really bad for us because what do we do against that? We don't have anything that can beat over the dad. What we'd have to do is just summon out Zanji, special summon out Grandmaster, but that's not even ideal because in order for Zanji to survive, to actually use its effect, it would have to pop the Grandmaster, and then we wouldn't have a 6 Sam on field to actually, be able to pop the dad. So I think we actually would just lose the game probably, unless we draw into something really good here. But as is, they don't do that. They just attack over the Iroh. So we're going to use Iroh to pop the Grandmaster. This may seem weird. The reason we do it is because we got another Grandmaster in hand. So we don't really care if we lose this one Grandmaster here because we have another, and we'd rather just have the Iroh on field, just in case like they've got something else. And also just another body on field, which we wouldn't be able to have if we kept Grandmaster around. So I feel like now we're in a really, really good spot. They go for Allure. That's their one activation. They're going to banish a Zombie Master here. They do draw into a Crow as well. So Crow would have been able to be used here to actually, stop the Grandmaster from adding itself back. So we would have been in an even worse spot there. But yeah, they're just going to mid defeat. So yeah, unfortunately, they were not able to get to Dad. Actually, they could have actually just DB Crowed, banished the Grandmaster, and then summoned out Double Dad because they would still have 3 Darks Engrave there. So actually they should have still won that game, even though they did not attack in the optimal order. But sometimes you're playing the game and you got a specific line in mind and it can easily get lost in the sauce, and so yeah. But again, like this deck has a glaring weakness to Dad. If they can set it up, then we are kind of just dead in the water, which is a death knell for a lot of decks in this format, including this one in my opinion. So of course, if your opponent doesn't get to Dad or you're able to get aggressive enough to kill them before they can set up Dad, then that's very good for you. But I still think overall it's not the best here. But we go for reasoning. They call 5, so they do indeed call it correct there. Unfortunately, we're not able to set up our Shien this turn and, somehow Iroh get in for a bunch of damage. So that's a bit unfortunate for us. But that is the right call against this deck, and that's another thing this deck can suffer from, where if your opponent knows what you're playing, they will know what reasoning call to do, because 5 is the best option in this deck. Sure, if you hit into Shien, that's pretty bad, but you don't want the Grandmaster getting in rotation because Grandmaster is sort of the heart and soul of the deck. It is, what you do. Of course, you got DD Crow. I guess you can call 7, but yeah, it's kind of rough for us. I just set the Rhoda here. I figure that I want some bluff of a back row so they don't go too crazy here. If they do go Dad, pop the back row, that's unfortunate. But if they do that, we're probably dead anyways, so it doesn't really matter what we search off the Rhoda. And we do have a variety of 6 Sams in hand, so it's likely we need more normal summons to search out off Rhoda, right? So yeah, I just set that pass. They're going to flip up a Pyramid Turtle here. And the reason why I didn't summon out a 6 Sam as well is because, if they do have Turtle, they can just crash it into that 6 Sam. And I don't want that to happen. So that's why I went for this. They're going to summon out a Goblin Zombie as well. Attack in for 11 plus 12. And they're going to mill the top cover of our deck, which is pre-mat, which would have been pretty good here to get back the Grandmaster if they didn't have DD Crow. But they're going to pass back to us. Now, given that they did not, just snipe this back row in our end phase like they did earlier in the game, I have the read that they don't have MST right now. So I feel like it is safe just to summon out Yaichi, see if that provokes a response. It does not, and then go for swords here. So now, hopefully, I'll be able to establish my board here. If I bring out another 6 Sam next turn, then I can get a Shien, and I'm in a decent spot, at least a better spot than I would be otherwise. So I'm going to pass from them. And we do get punished for this, but I do want to make a note. They do not have MST here, so we don't get punished from that. We get punished from the top decked MST. So I still think this was the right play to make because, again, I had the read that they did not have MST here, and they did indeed not have the MST. So I think it was a reasonable read to make, but unfortunately they did it, they drew into the MST, so we did lose it. And that's another, downside to MST, right? MST is not the best card in this format since there is so much removal. Even if they didn't get into MST, they could have potentially gotten into other things that could pop it. So it's not even the best for us. Although Breaker's not in the format anymore because it's banned. Because they felt like that was enough of a problem to hit on the list. But yeah, they're going to go into Illblood here. They have non-normal summons, so they can actually normal summon that Illblood and then go for double card to save for turn, go for the Illblood, and draw 2 off that. So that's a bit unfortunate for us. Now they've got a replenished hand. They got a pretty good field. But we do draw into Reasoning, and Reasoning is pretty good for us here. We can go for Reasoning. They call 5 again, which makes sense, but we hit the Shien. So we do get out of Shien. I was kind of hoping for a regular 6 Sam that we could then summon an Iroh and then go for another Shien. But it's still fine. It gets us there. We're going to summon out the Iroh because this time we actually can, get over things with the Iroh. We're attacking the Illblood, which also will pop the Pyramid Turtle, which is very nice. And then we're going to attack into the Yaichi here. Get that in our own graveyard. And this leaves them with one Dark Engrave, so we're going to force them, if they do want to sort of get that Goblin Zombie Engrave to set up for Dad, they're going to have to go to their battle phase, and we could potentially survive a little bit longer on the following turn. But they're going to go for, what are they going to do here? Just attacking into the Iroh. So it looks like they are indeed going to use up their battle phase here, which is kind of what I wanted. They could have done this into the Xian anyways, so it doesn't really matter in that respect. But they're going to search out a Zombie Master, go for Zombie Master here, pitch a Tomato. And we weren't quite sure how this works, like whether you get both draws off of the Card of Safe Return. But before people say that this might determine the outcome of the game, it ultimately did not. They already had Dad in hand here, and this does get them into 3 darks. So I do think that, like, in hindsight, it was probably just one Card Save Return draw. I think that would happen because of when you can. So not that might change things here. Like, even if it was an if this thing happens, you can do this, then the Xian might still prevent you from doing both. But yeah, I think they probably should have only got one draw here, but it does not matter in the end. They have Dad, and Dad just completely hoses us here. They're able to banish one, to target the Xian, and I'm just going to use Xian to protect itself by popping the Iroh. Not that it matters, because they can just banish another and pop the Xian there. But this is forcing them to banish 2, at least, in case they didn't want to pop the Iroh. They do have the Allure here. It does not matter in the slightest. Once Dad comes down, we do not have a way to deal with that. Zanji will not help, because we don't have further extension here. Rhoda cannot get us anything that we actually need here, so yeah, it's going to be a bit bad. I could have potentially gone for Rhoda earlier to thin out the deck a bit of normal summons, but, like, our deck is basically entirely normal summons, so I was saving the Rhoda for when we needed to get, like, a Silver Bullet for something, which I do think is correct here. But yeah, it unfortunately did not work out well for us. We were a bit monster bricked, which is something that this deck can run into because all of its monsters are normal summons, which in the past has not been a bad thing because, to be fair, in most past formats, most monsters are normal summons, right? That's what you're doing, right? But in this format where you've got like Dad Return, which is so explosive, and it's a deck that can really special summon out a lot and just spit out a lot of its hand on board very quickly, you can't really playing it as slow a deck as this. And to be fair, this deck is trying to do things to speed up a bit. It's playing the Reasoning, it's playing side res, things like that. But I just don't think it's enough in this format to actually compete against Dad Return. And that's sort of my verdict on the deck. It's kind of sad because I love Sixam, so it's sad to see it sort of fall out of relevancy a little bit here. Of course, with future releases, it will rise back into relevancy, so I'm looking forward to that. But that's just the ebb and flow of archetypes in general, right? There are different formats where an archetype's good or bad, right? And you play the formats that you want to. If you want to play a format where 6Ms are good, there are plenty of those out there. So, I don't necessarily think this is too sad of a thing. But yeah, it is kind of cool to see the decks, sort of fall out of relevance in real time, and the formats change in real time as well. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and this sort of showcase of what 6Ms could do. And let me know if you disagree with my assessment of 6Ms down in the comments below, and also what you'd potentially change to the list. As I mentioned, there are some things that I think would be good to change, not necessarily just because of Dad, but also just because, I sort of differ in my tastes on certain cards, like Sidra, for instance. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. As always, big shout outs to my patrons, Rinspin, Porkchop, Brett Knocker, Tyler Compton, GeoMyFest, Dump Truck, and Scout Zero, along with Damon Hess. It really encourages me to make more videos like this, and I really appreciate you for actually supporting me in that way, because it's just very, very nice to see people appreciate me. Join the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below if you want to play games in this format or in any other format that I feature on the channel. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, signing off. Peace.